It's 2 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our March How to Go Solar event. My name is Kate Ayers, and I am the Community Education Specialist here at Solar Oregon. First off, I would like to touch on our agenda for today. So we'll go over some of the basics of how a solar system works. We'll talk about, is my home right for solar? We'll go over some of the solar incentives, and then finally, we are joined today by Zach Henkin, who is going to share his solar story for us. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So to start off, Solar Oregon is a nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon, that has been around for 40 years, focusing on education, outreach, community, and advocacy programs. Our main program right now is our How to Go Solar events, which you are a part of currently. We also host 2 solar tour events. We have our solar winery tour, which is coming up here in August. And then we also do a Go Zero tour of homes that is usually in the fall. Some of our other programs are our Solarize campaigns, which are a great way for an entire community to go solar at once. And all of our work is really centered around the importance of peer-to-peer education and the sharing of solar stories. If you would like to support our work, we are a member-based nonprofit. So if you would like to donate to our work, or if you would like to become a member, please either use this bit.ly link or go onto our website to start your membership. If you are already a member and are on this call, thank you so much for your continued support of our work. And finally, before we get into things, just a big thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon for supporting these events. So I know that we are probably all very used to Zoom right now in the current COVID days, but just a little refresher to go over. We do have a Q&A box, which is on the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the entirety of this event, and we will make sure to go over all of your questions at the end. And then another function is just our Zoom polling. So I'm going to launch a couple of polls right now to just gauge where this one right here is just where you're tuning in from. So where you are coming from and listening to this event from. These polls really help us gauge the people that we're reaching and where we may need to do some more outreach to. So thank you to those who are filling this out. It's super helpful. It looks like the majority of everybody on the call today is from Portland, so that's awesome. It's a sunny day in Portland, so that's always helpful. Thanks for joining this call with us. Great, and so I just have a couple other polls really quick. This poll is completely anonymous. It is a demographics poll. We ask you these questions just so that we can really see the audiences that we're reaching, as well as where we still need to do some work. It's really helpful in tailoring our programs and understanding the demographics that we're hitting. So if you're willing to fill out this poll, really appreciate it. It's helpful for us in building our future programming as well. This one is a little bit longer, so I'll give you a little bit more time to complete this, but thank you to those who are filling it out. And as I said, completely anonymous, we're not going to share this information with anybody. Great. Looks like everyone has filled it out, so thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And the final brief one question poll we have is just what your level of familiarity you have with solar energy. So do you know solar a little bit? Do you not know really anything at all? Have you spoken to an installer, or do you already have solar? Awesome. It looks like most people at least have some knowledge of solar. A lot of people have spoken to an installer, and a few people on this call already have solar, which is great. Thanks for still joining us today. Perfect. So I'm going to end this, and we will get started with the rest of our presentation. So first off, just going to touch on how does solar work. So here you have a basic system components of a solar system. So first, sunlight will hit your photovoltaic panel or your PV panel, solar panel, and it will produce electricity. And so that electricity from the panel will go into an inverter or microinverter, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And in order to make sure that that electricity can be used in your house, that inverter will convert it into a usable electricity type. Then it will move into your home electrical panel in your house, and you'll be able to utilize that electricity. And once you've installed your solar system, you will get a new bi-directional utility meter installed on your house. And that will just measure how much energy you're producing versus how much energy you're consuming. And if you have extra, it will flow onto the utility grid. So here are the two types of inverters. You have the inverter on the left-hand side, which is that white box that just sits next to your electrical panel. And the other common system is a microinverter, which sits underneath an individual solar panel or every other solar panel. Both of these are really great options, and it'll just kind of depend on what your installer thinks is the best route for you to take. The other thing I want to touch on briefly are mounting options. So the two main mounting options are roof mount or ground mount. Roof mount is the most common, as it is just the panels being placed onto the roof of your house. And this can save you a lot of space. If you have extra space on your property, or you're interested in having your panels a little further away from your house, or you have better southern exposure, you could opt for a ground mount system. The important thing to note with this is that the wiring for your electrical panels does have to be wired back to your house. And so in order to set it up, they would have to trench the area and lay that wiring. And so that could be a little bit of an extra cost. So I mentioned briefly earlier about your bidirectional meter and how much energy you're producing versus using. So that leads into net metering. So these two graphs just show different energy productions in the summer months versus the winter months. So in the summer months, since we have more sun, obviously, your solar system would be producing more energy than you are usually using. And so you would be receiving a net metering credit for those the extra electricity that you're using. So then in the winter months, when you are consuming more electricity than you're producing through your solar system, you are able to utilize those credits that have gone back to the grid during those summer months. So the next piece that we'd like to talk about is just some things to think about when looking at your home and your solar potential. So one of the key things is just your system size. So this just looks at how it's mostly based off of how much electricity your home consumes, how large your home is. It's not necessarily beneficial to have a system that is much larger than your home. With those net metering credits, there is a cutoff date of when you can use those during the electrical year. And so if you're producing a lot more than you're consuming, you might not necessarily see much of a benefit from that. Some of the other factors to consider are how much space you have, what your budget is, but just for your information, kind of the average system size that we see is about 6 kilowatts. Another important thing to consider is just your home solar access. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, on the left-hand side, it shows that the sun for us is always in the southern sky. So southern exposure is going to give you the most solar energy, but that doesn't necessarily mean west or east placements are bad. You just may see a little bit more for a southern facing roof, but your contractor will be able to talk more about your solar potential based on your roof space and the direction of your roof. Roofing materials is another thing to consider. The two main types of roofs are asphalt shingle and standing seam metal. On the asphalt shingle, you'll have a metal flashing that will be drilled into your roof rafter to secure it. And then on standing seam metal, the solar panels will be connected on the seam with a little metal piece that will connect the panel to the roof. The final thing really to consider is your roof condition and age. So a newer roof is definitely better because a contractor, when you do get your roof replaced, will have to come out, take off your solar system, have the roof replaced, and then put that system back on your roof. So it'll save a lot of time and extra expense if you have a newer roof. The other thing to think about here is that the energy trust incentives do require at least 10 years of roof life. So that extra incentive is helpful if you have a newer roof. Roof structure is also something to consider. The underneath structure can just change the way that your contractor installs your solar system. It's not a concern, but it just may take an extra step if you have trusses versus rafters, but your contractor can walk you through that process. So moving forward, one of the other things that we want to touch on, and one of everybody's favorite subjects, are solar incentives. So since solar has really started, we've seen a real drop in the overall price and normal cost of what solar is. The three major incentives here in Oregon are the investment tax credit, which is a federal incentive, the Oregon Solar Plus Storage rebate, as well as the Energy Trust incentives. So the federal tax credit was just renewed in December at 26%. So that would be 26% of your system cost as a tax credit. The important thing to note here is that you do need tax liability to take advantage of this credit. The Oregon Solar Plus Storage funding is up to $5,000. What's really key here is that this funding comes in waves, and so it's up in the air right now of what that funding is going to look like moving forward after this legislative season. Energy Trust of Oregon, their main incentives are up to just under $3,000. With Energy Trust of Oregon incentives, you do have to be in PGE or Pacific Power territory, and you must use one of their trade ally contractors, which I'll speak on a little bit later. Another Energy Trust program is their Solar Within Reach program. It can be up to $9,000 per home, depending on the utility that you're on. The important thing to note here is that there is an income threshold for this program, but there is a lot more information available on the Energy Trust website with that program. So here we have just a sample budget of what a system pricing could look like. The important thing to note is that it's really difficult to give an accurate budget of what a system will look like. It varies based on how big your system is and your roof type, as well as structure and what incentives are available to you. But this is just an overall idea of what a residential rebate would look like for a 6 kilowatt system versus a low or moderate income residential rebate system of the same size. So as you see here, the starting cost for both of these systems in this example is $20,000. And depending on the amount of incentives available at the time, that could drop down to the final cost being around $13,000 or just under $4,500, depending on those incentives. So the last piece that I really want to touch on is after you have kind of decided you're ready to take those next steps, how do you get started? So one of the things that we recommend is talking to and reaching out to the Energy Trust trade allies. These contractors are approved to give out Energy Trust incentives, and they are qualified through Energy Trust's evaluations. The link for that is energytrust.org/solarbid, which will be put in the chat, but it'll take you to this webpage where you can request a quote, and then you will be able to reach out to a few different trade allies in your territory that will be able to give you bids on the system that you're looking at. So once you've chosen your contractor and you're ready to install your system, some of the key things to know are that your contractor will complete all of the paperwork associated with that. They will make sure that the adequate permits are in place, and they will apply for net metering and the Energy Trust incentives for your system. Installation itself usually takes 1 to 2 days, but it can kind of depend on how busy they are. Your contractor will also manage inspections after that, but the really key piece here is that while your contractor will help you with a lot of the incentives that are available, that federal tax credit incentive is going to be your responsibility to get that all together. So your contractor will make sure that your inspections are complete and your grid is interconnected, and you will be all set for your solar. So now I would like to introduce Zach Henkin, who is our solar story for today. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to Zach.
Cool. Thanks, Kate. Let me share my screen. Where am I? Screen 2. Okay. Cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Zach Henkin. I'm going to talk a little bit about my recent solar experience. We just got a solar PV system installed in December. And leading up to that, I had been kind of working in different elements of the solar industry, trying to support solar for a long time in Oregon, and I'm a Solar Oregon member, so I encourage that if it's something you're considering. But to begin with, my story begins with the people who I live with and care about. And this is a snapshot of my wife, my kiddos, my brother-in-law, and right in the middle is, our fur friend, Lucy, who is always at the center of attention, as I'm sure many of your fur friends are. But we have, a pretty big mix with, foster kids coming in and out of our home. So really kind of sharing that, like, we're ordinary folks and solar worked for us. And I'll tell you how. What led up to me getting solar really was we moved into our home in Milwaukee, and previously I lived in Oregon City and had shade. And so when we had gotten bids before from solar contractors, we never quite met that solar resource value because of big trees in our neighbors' yards. And I didn't want to barter with them to chop off their trees, or chops off the tops rather. And ultimately, for a variety of reasons, we moved to Milwaukee, where we have a great solar resource factor. Our home is 2 stories. We're in a newer subdivision. And you'll see more images from our neighborhood in just a second. But we get great solar. This big image here on the left of your screen is a look at our electricity usage. We do have a gas furnace and a gas water heater, and we also have a homeowners association that we interacted with. And the homeowners association we had to do a little extra paperwork, which was to get permission from our neighbors in doing this, but otherwise it was just no problem. Our electricity usage is about average for what a typical home would have, of about 10 to 12,000 kilowatt hours per year. So that's what we're seeing. I think for me, long term, we'll probably look to get an electric water heater, and we just added a plug-in vehicle. So because we're charging an EV, this number will likely go up. The system we landed on was this 8.32 solar array, and this was the mock-up that the contractor shared initially. This is 26 panels of Hanwha 320s and 26 N-phase microinverters. I like microinverters a whole lot. N-phase has been around a long time. And what that does is it makes it so that if there is shade or a cloud over one panel or several panels, the rest of the solar array will keep producing at full strength. Typically with a string inverter, you might shut off half of that panel because there's a cloud on that bottom corner. So I kind of opted for the more premium products because I wanted the most efficient panels I could get and the best inverters I could get, because this was a one-time decision that is going to last for the next 20 years on the house. So that is what I went with. They also turned out to be black, which is cool, and they look good on the roof. But it's a big system, and it'll take care of about 80% of our electricity uses. So this is the pricing. And the picture is essentially where we will see that solar generation throughout the year. So of course, it being Oregon, we're going to get more sun and irradiance during the summer months, less so during the winter months, but this is where net metering comes in. Since we just installed in December, we're not really seeing what those peaks look like, but I'm excited because we're starting to get a little sunshine now. These are the actual numbers for what they'll let us to sign on the line on this agreement. So, and I will say, when we went through this, I got multiple bids and ultimately landed on Elemental Energy. They're my next slide. But I encourage you to do the same, because one bid that I got was more than double this cost. But right off the top, we were able to get the rebate from the Energy Trust. And in addition to that, we were able to count the federal tax credit on our taxes. We went with what is known as like a Solar Plus loan through Generations Community Credit Union or something like that, where it's a staggered loan based where it's counted on that you put that federal tax credit back into the loan, and it lowers that cost, where we're paying a monthly cost for the debt service of the loan, which nearly equates to what the cost of electricity is that it's displacing. So it made it very financially palatable, and I didn't have to write a check for $14,000. It's all financed nearly, and it makes it super easy. So because that'll lower the cost of electricity and displace that loan over time. Big shout out to Elemental Energy. For anyone who's been working in the area for very long, Elemental Energy is one of the best solar installers I can recommend. They were super helpful, as Kate said, and this is really reflective of most any installer. They did all the work, of course, of the solar installation, the paperwork, everything else. But they're also super flexible just in working with our schedules and our family. And mind you, we've been in a working from home pandemic situation this last year, and even notwithstanding, they were super flexible there and easy to work with. I worked with Josh Little throughout, so it was one point of contact, despite us having lots of different people that we were interacting with, whether it was for coordination for financing or for permits or for the actual installation itself. I can't say more good things about them, but how about some pictures? So here we are. This is my home and the solar array and my messy backyard that we don't want to talk about. But we have this east-facing roof, which is the bulk of the system. And then over on the top north part of your screen, you'll see that south-facing smaller array. That's the total array. This is a pretty steep roof, but the contractor didn't have any problem getting up there. They tied off appropriately per OSHA rules and all that. But yeah, nice and simple. You can see this south-facing array from the street. And similarly, if you're walking through the neighborhood, you can see this east-facing array as well. But if you're at the ground level, if you're like right under it, you can't see it. I really like how the black panels on black came out too. There's another image. And this is Josh from Elemental. He came out with his drone camera and ran that over. It's like, here, let me do that for you. It's like, that's awesome. You're awesome. So because this is an Enphase system, and I don't have familiarity with other solar inverters and what their logins are like, but this is the portal that I get to log into nearly every day to check out how things are producing. So this is yesterday, and you can see like where that generation is at the time of day. And so often, like you'll see these dips, and it's like that's a cloud, and I can scroll through and check out the lifetime, the month, the week, but it's really neat to check out the granularity. And I have a friend who has an Enphase system as well that's slightly smaller, and we can compare the notes and be like, oh, your peak generation on X day was this much and mine was that much. So it's fun, and also for me, I can connect to the kids and be like, look, we're generating electricity. And that's it. This last slide, it's another look where you can see on a per moment time basis of what the individual solar panel is generating. Super nice just to see from a production level. Another thing I like about microinverters is that if for some reason you had a panel or a microinverter that wasn't functioning 100% correctly, you'd be able to spot it right away. So it's another kind of fail safe to make sure everything is producing accordingly. At this point, I'm looking forward to like getting my taxes back because I don't have that information yet. And seeing what a full year's worth of generation is like, because that'll really make a lot of sense for us because of the net metering. And then possibly considering storage in the future. We just got a plug-in minivan that's going to increase our usage a little bit. So I think the more that we can be pulling electrons from the sun, the better. That's it for me.
Awesome.
Back to you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Zach. Are you willing to stick around and answer a couple questions that people had for you specifically?
Yeah, sure, of course. Let me catch up on chat too.
One, Lewis asked if you've seen so far your monthly electrical bill go down at all.
I have, and I would say, and I have to admit, I wasn't really paying attention to my electrical all that much beforehand, but it was like in that above $120 amount, and it is now at about 60. So I would say it went down about half. And I anticipate it'll go down more once we factor in like how much we'll be generating in the summer. Because right now we're just talking about like January sunshine.
Absolutely. Julia asked if you sized your solar system so that you could eventually get rid of your gas appliances.
No. That array and the design really came about just from coordinating with Elemental about like how they can maximize our roof. So we do have an electric induction stove. So our only appliances are the furnace, the water heater. And so like if we could get more panels up there, I would, but I think we would need greater efficiency or something, or we'd have to get really creative.
Great. And then just one other question from Carl, who said, Zach, it looks like you might get about $1,000 worth of electricity in a year or $1,000 worth, so the system would pay for itself in about 14 years. Is that about right? Do you know?
That might be right, but that seems way too conservative. I think based on the loan, and I think if what we do and the plan is to put the tax credit right back into the loan. And I think, given over time, like we pay it back, if all we did was make payments based on the energy savings, like it would be, I think, I haven't done the math, so it might be 14 years. I think it would be less than 10, but I'm an optimist. But in reality, what we're going to do is probably, I'm sure, to pay that down quicker, just to have it done with.
Awesome.
And I see, looks like Robert, banking partner yourself. No, in this case, Elemental, our contractor, gave us a few options for financing, and they coordinated an introduction where we applied with Generations, and they facilitated the rest. And because that specific loan product was really designed around solar, that really worked for us. I will say, like, because I've seen a lot of different financing options over the years, like it is financing that makes these systems happen. This isn't a lease or anything like that. There are a lot of different options. The financing we have, it's not a second on the house. They simply are loaning on the value of the solar system and balance the system itself, which is really unique and cool. Because, but I think 10 years ago, banks were not willing to do that. So your mileage might vary, but there are a number of good options out there to consider if a solar system is something that is something you're contemplating.
Great. There's one more question for you in the Q&A, and it was mainly about how you compared the different quotes that you received. Was it mostly via price, or were there different products that they were using?
Sure. So the way that came about, and originally what set me down this path was, I don't have a storage battery yet. In fact, over the ice storm, we lost power for about 6 days. So it certainly has me thinking about storage. I want to talk about storage now, but I'm not going to. Yeah, originally a canvasser came to the door, and I thought, sure, I'll talk to the canvasser and get a bid. And they were nice and polite, and they set something up with a nice person who gave us a site survey. But it was kind of funky, where the person was out of state, or the company was largely based out of state, and the bid was more than $50,000, and the technology was, I'm sure, good. I wasn't, for instance, familiar with hand wall panels when we decided to buy hand wall panels. But like the inverter and the panels, I wasn't really worried about that. But the cost was a lot, and I didn't know who would be doing the installation. I'd been familiar with Elemental Energy for a while, so it's just easy to just call them and ask for another bid. And they did. And I had been familiar with Enphase, so that was an easy decision. Solar panels are generally commoditized these days, where they're all very reliable. So I didn't have concerns for those panels. But that's more or less how the decision came to be. I personally had really good experience with Elemental. Another good area installer is Sunlight Solar. I know folks could choose them and have probably no problems at all. There are a few really good local outfits that Solar Oregon can point you to if you ask them.
Great, thank you, Zach. Those are all of the questions directed specifically to you right now, but please, if anybody has any more, feel free to answer that, to put them in the Q&A or the chat. I do have a couple things here. Carl asked, what does ETO require in terms of solar access, i.e. shading issues? That's a great question, Carl. They do have an online tool that I can find for you and put in there that allows you to see your the amount of sun that reaches your roof. But part of that is just talking to a trade ally. Their trade allies are the ones that really determine what your solar access is and will help point out some of those major issues of having a tree in the way or how much sun is reaching your roof.
And I can add a little insight, Kate.
Please do.
Energy Trust is looking for a 75% total solar resource factor, TSRF. And the only way to get to that is to basically put a sun eye, like a 360-degree camera on your roof. Typically, a contractor, when you first call and you're interested, they'll look at Google Maps and say, there's no way you're going solar, I'm sorry. Or they'll say, let's schedule something and we'll get on your roof. Because they do this every day. They can pretty much do that. But that sweet spot, that number is 75%. And then that is related to all kinds of factors with angle, the roof line, definitely your shading and all of that.
Great, thank you, Zach. Susan asked in the chat a question for you, Zach, which was, looking back, what was your biggest aha from this process?
Honestly, it was super easy. And because of the way the financing displaces the bill, like I had always thought it, from giving presentations and stuff, that like it was just something you say of like there's never a better time to go solar than now. But like seriously, it was really, really simple. And it provides a great foundation for us to drive on electricity with our EV and save money. I mean, I don't mind paying down the loan over time because I know it's a good thing. It adds value to the home. But like the myriad of reasons worked for us, which are we do have a little bit of tax liability. We have a house that's not shaded. So like if all the boxes check, it is one of those things that like I would really encourage people to consider. If all the boxes don't check, then that's a different situation.
Great. Just a couple other things in the Q&A. Julia commented saying that they got an Energy Trust refund when they had their solar system mounted on a roof that was going to be needing replaced 2 years later. But they paid the solar contractor upfront to remove and replace the panels when they did that. So that's something to note if that is an issue for you. Question for you, Zach. Did you talk to your installers about racking your panels, particularly the ones on the east, to improve the sun angle?
Specifically on that, no. I know they can do it, but they also generally will take it into consideration when they're installing, because I forget the racking they used, but those are installed at it does add an angle, so they factor that in when they're doing the TSRF calculations. And I would say, I mean, where we have a lot of angle on our roof, so that wasn't something that they necessarily needed to do. You will typically see that more often on like a flat roof. Then they'll add a high degree of angle. And then the large concern there is wind load. So we didn't talk about it because we didn't need to, because it wasn't our situation.
Great, thank you.
I'm seeing the question on maximum kilowatt hours that I can export. That's a hard one. The general rule of thumb is they don't want you to size a system that is larger than your annual usage. And so the amount that they want you to export is 0. But there are workarounds where you can promise that you're going to be buying 2 EVs and that your generation or that your load will go up in the next coming years. But you need to have like some kind of justification if you're going to install, if you're going to be, producing that much power that you're not using.
Great. And then the only other real question I'm seeing is from Rod, who says, do you see federal, state, or local incentives changing much in the next 2 to 3 years? I think that's a great question, Rod. I think we've already kind of seen some changes with that federal tax incentive being extended at a higher rate in December and extended for longer, which is a really great start. And I know that there are some bills up in Oregon right now in the legislature to get more funding for things like solar plus storage on the table, and for some clean energy bills that would increase the solar potential. So I think there are some great opportunities on the horizon potentially. Rod also asked, did you have to do any upgrades to your existing electrical panel box? And did Elemental handle any and all subcontracting needs or permitting needs?
We didn't need any upgrades. So this was a really straightforward installation for them. And as I understand, like they're using all of their own electricians, so there wasn't any need to subcontract out anything. And likewise, they managed all of the permits on all of that stuff too. And because we're in, I say we're in Milwaukee, but really it's unincorporated Clackamas County. It was super simple for an over-the-counter permit to make all this happen. And I'll just add in, just because it's flavor, there's a couple quick inspections, basically to check the work after it was all said and done and before being commissioned. But even that was super simple, and somebody dropped by in a mask, was here for like less than 10 minutes and was out the door.
Great. Oh, one more question in the chat. Zach, what year is your house? Did you need any roof enhancements?
Our home is a 2004, or like it's a car. Our neighborhood was platted in 2004, so our house is from 2004. No roof enhancements. I mean, they inspected to make sure that all the trusses and any support was good and didn't need any further engineering, but we have enough roof life left where they weren't any concerned about any need to reshingle or anything like that, which is good. Yeah, no concerns there.
Great. That is the last question that I'm seeing so far. We have a few more minutes if anyone wants to put anything else in, but if not, Zach, thank you so much for being a part of this presentation and for sharing your story and answering questions. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm not seeing anything else, so.
Thanks, Kate, and keep up the good work. And I hope more people consider solar.
Great.
Worked for us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye.
Bye.